Let's turn now to Elizabeth New. She has double duty as a center director, both for our Center for Healthcare and our Center for Worker Rights. And Elizabeth is joining us now. Elizabeth, I want to start with what's on the ballot. We have a question about whether or not certain state funds should be invested so that some new programs can be paid for. And there's different ways of looking at this. One is at least if there's a higher rate of return, then taxpayers won't be on the hook for ever increasing payroll taxes and other things in order to make up the difference. But at the same time, maybe the program itself is a problem, and finding ways to fund it just encourages the creation of more of the same. So I'd like to get your analysis on what you're looking at regarding the ballot issue and how you're seeing these investments.
Well, the program is a problem. It's the WA Cares program we're talking about. This is the program that takes wages from all W-2 Washingtonian workers and hands that money over sometimes to people with no need for taxpayer dependency. That's the biggest problem I see with this WA Cares program, along with the fact that it earns you a possible benefit someday if you need long-term care of $36,500, which is not enough to cover most people's long-term care needs. So the program is a problem, but Senate Joint Resolution 8201 has nothing to do with whether or not you like WA Cares. It's entirely a question asking voters whether the state investment board should be allowed to invest WA Cares dollars in more ways than it can now with hopes of stronger fund growth. Because I think WA Cares needs all the help it can get to stay solvent, I think Senate Joint Resolution offers a good solution for trying to get the best returns. The last thing I want to see is workers face constantly increasing payroll tax deductions for WA Cares. So the more money we have that is being invested in growing this fund on its own without taxpayer investment, the better, I say.
What's the argument against? What's the risks involved if the state takes this approach?
The risks are legitimate, right? There's people on both sides of this issue, and it really has to do with what you think is better for investment returns. If you trust the stock market to give you those better returns, right now, the reason why it's a constitutional amendment is because the Constitution restricts how the Washington State Investment Board can invest this money. And so this would give it the flexibility to diversify. And what I like about it is, the Washington State Investment Board does this for pensions and a disabled fund. So they already have a track record here, and their track record is pretty good. They're showing returns of about 8% a year versus the 4% that is predicted if they stick WA Cares with the funding ability it has now. So I'm all for more returns. I do think that the Washington State Investment Board is capable of seeking the highest returns in a prudent way. But there are people concerned, the market's volatile. And it's legitimate to think, what if one year in WA Cares, the market is way down and there's tons of applicants for these funds? That could be a problem. I don't think it would be, because I think that lawmakers would steal the money from the general fund like they've done in the past to supplement programs they create. So I think that could be worked out and it would ride out the long-term investment strategy.
Since you mentioned stealing from programs, what happens if they invest and it goes fairly well and they start to feel a little flush, like, you know what, we're doing so well here, maybe we need to take some of this money out and put it somewhere else. Is it protected funds like the highway fund, or could it end up as a slush fund?
They are protected funds.
Okay.
So the best case scenario, right, would be to actually right now the WA Cares Fund promise is some workers who need long-term care and who meet the qualifications of having paid in for 10 years It offers some workers the ability to take a 36,500 lifetime benefit that can be used to pay for things the state approves of and allocates. So caregivers that have their approval, services that have their approval. We all know 36,500 isn't a lot. The money is said to grow with inflation. That's not entirely true. The money can grow up to the rate of inflation. So that has to be decided as we go along, and it's not even going to be touched until 2027. So we've had a fund sitting here for years, since 2019, that has not risen with the rate of inflation. It's been sitting stagnant. So we've already lost a ton of ground on this thing, and that shows up in Genworth cost of care surveys. This 36,500 might go 3 months for some people who need a high level of care. It might go 6 months for people who need home care services and meals delivered to them, that kind of thing. So back to your question, I think in the best case scenario, if they have all this money coming out of their ears for this program because the Washington State Investment Board rocked it, they could possibly lower the amount of the tax rate. That'd be awesome. They could increase the amount of the benefit for people who are actually qualifying for the benefit. So there's things they could do that both help taxpayers who have paid into this fund, which, by the way, is awful because, again, it takes money from low-income workers and it will often give it to people with no need for taxpayer dependency. It's not a safety net and it's harming workers.
Martel has a question for you. What's the original reason why the Constitution prohibited the Washington State Investment Board from investing this fund in the way they propose?
Too risky. So, you know, the investment strategy was built back in the horse and buggy days, and it didn't allow for, it allowed government bonds. It didn't allow for stock market investments. So it's just changing over times. Our financial strategies and the way we now diversify things, I think is important and needs to be updated. And it has been updated for things like the pension fund, for state workers and a disabled fund, which I'm not sure what that's called.
Okay. Let's turn now, since you mentioned things that taxpayers need to do to protect things. You also have written a piece on Medicaid and the state's need to better protect Medicaid funds. Let's talk about why that is and what your publication's all about.
You're talking about the long-term care Medicaid stuff, right?
Yep.
So Medicaid has a safety net for people who need long-term care. And that's somewhat hilarious because what the state has done is they've created this thing that they call a safety net insurance program for people when the same people who are in need and don't have resources and don't have assets or income could have qualified for Medicaid long-term care, but instead they're paying a tax on their wages for all of their working years, 58 cents for every $100 right now. That could go up like it has for other payroll tax programs. So, my paper, a funny thing happened on the way to talking about WA Cares all the time. I started looking into the bigger nightmare of how Medicaid is going to be in trouble soon because it has uh, horrible rules surrounding who receives a safety net. People are able to qualify for Medicaid long-term care by appearing poor on paper, but having transferred their assets to heirs. They are not subject to a state recovery in most cases that would then recoup some of the cost after a person no longer needs a home or their family no longer needs the home that the Medicaid long-term care recipient received. So that's what my paper is about. I mean, we're in a graying population right now. People need more things and more care. We also have more people applying for long-term care through Medicare at younger ages. So both the younger age application of it and the graying population, we're seeing an increased length of duration of time that people use long-term care. And it's going to be trouble for all taxpayers if we don't get a handle on this. So, yeah, my paper is about reforms we could make to that Medicaid long-term care that keep people in need at the forefront. We can protect the safety net for them. And on the other hand, we can protect people's dignity by people who need to use the fund because they haven't saved for long-term care, and many of us haven't, and many of us aren't insured for long-term care. That's also an option out there. But it allows people to use taxpayer help, but then pay it back when they're gone. So that's what this paper is about.
But you've also pointed out that Washington State's program, because it doesn't function as a safety net, but it functions as kind of a I'm not sure how to phrase it. It ends up functioning really as a subsidy for wealthier people on the backs of workers, because the wealthier people tend to use the program more, and poorer people are paying the tax, no matter what. So, you know, one of the things that you've pointed out is that that this is a steepening problem. That over time, we talked about this last year, that poorer people were less likely to use the program. New data has come forward, and the problem's worse. Describe that.
That's definitely true with paid family and medical leave. That's what we're talking about when we're talking.
Yes, sorry. Yeah,
I,
I switched.
yeah, you froze on me right there, but
Oh,
I'll.
I was saying I switched programs. I'm sorry about that. Yes, but in my mind, I'm thinking this. It's the same kind of thing where we have these things that are supposed to be, safety nets that don't end up being safety nets. And now with walk-cares, you have a similar situation where if you are asset rich, for example, this ends up protecting all your assets in some way, or I shouldn't say that. It helps protect some of your assets and keeps you from having to pay for them, even if you have those assets to pay. And that's at expense of people who really have nothing. And so instead of it being a safety net, we end up giving people kind of a leg up who just want to keep not pay for themselves, so to speak.
Yes, these programs are progressive in rhetoric, but regressive in reality.
That's
You've
the
got.
line I was looking for. That's right. I like that.
I love that line. But we walk hairs might turn out to be like PFML. Paid family medical leave right now is taxing all workers to give some workers a benefit to either address medical concerns for themselves or others, or to bond with newborns, which is great, but not always something you need to do on other taxpayers' dime. And people who are taking advantage of paid family medical leave, which is available to all of us who pay it, are usually of middle or upper incomes. The people with low incomes, they're finding, use it the least, and the people with the highest income are more than doubling the low income users' use. The people in the middle are definitely the bulk of this fund payout right now, but we're seeing every year the people in the lowest wage quintile, they call it at Employment Security Department, they have shrunk from 2023 from 12% of use to 8% of use. In 2025, I think, yeah, fiscal year 2025, because we're still in it. And the highest wage quintile, that's people making $61 or more an hour. So into the hundreds of thousands, $100,000, 127,000, I think. They are using it. They've increased their usage from 16% to 18%. So we're seeing the lines go in the wrong directions. If this is a safety net, it's helping more people with means than it is helping people without means. So that's the problem. And I'm afraid Washington Cares is going to see the same thing. Right now, there's no payouts going on. That starts happening in 2026 for transitional users. Most of us will have to pay 10 years into the program to be eligible for any benefit. And you have to work more than 500 hours or more for each of those qualifying years to be a qualifying year. But I'm afraid the same thing's going to happen. We're going to see the tax increase possibly away from 58 cents per 100 to higher. And paid family and medical leave, we should note, has gone from 0.4%, a tax rate of 0.4% in 2019. Just 5 years later, it's up to 0.92. So this is nuts. 92 cents per $100 when we were promised 0.4. And next year, they think it will go up to 1.13% of a tax rate.
It's tough when you're talking about percentage. When you say it's going up, 0.3%, it sounds relatively small, but what we're talking about is, it's going to go up another 25, 30%, and it's already, more than doubled. And, it gives you an idea of how out of whack the projections for the tax were. Like, they had these projections where they say, hey, all we need in order to get this program going and to pay for itself is a tax of this much. But the assumptions that they're making are designed in such a way. Well, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but in my experience, it looks like oftentimes these assumptions are made with rose-colored glasses on so that they can get the program started, so that they can raise the taxes later because they know that the initial, assessment is off. There's no way all these rosy predictions are going to come true and that it's going to be able to pay for itself without more involved. And now we're seeing that it's increasing and becomes a de facto income tax at some point because there's so much of your income being taken out of your check.
And that's the really scary part. Last legislative session, there was a bill that was out there to change the way we calculate how much of a tax rate is needed for PFML each year. And within that bill, they suggested busting the rate cap, which is right now 1.2% or $1.20 for every $100. They suggested it should go up to $2. $2 for every 100. Right now, the average worker, as defined by the Employment Security Department, has about $875 going toward paid family medical leave. 600-ish and something from the employee and 200 something-ish from the employer going into that fund for that employee. So we're seeing workers indirectly and directly right now, the average worker in Washington state lose about nearly $1,000 a year. If this tax rate increases to 2%, that'll be $2,000 a year. That's big money. I know a lot of people who would like to use that money to do things like send their kids to college or help their kids through those years or take a vacation or invest that money. This isn't a small amount of money. This is
Yeah.
a car. This is a mortgage payment.
All
So
of this is adding up, right? And it's, you nickel and dime. There's a reason why there's a phrase, a saying that goes death by a thousand cuts,
yeah.
because little things add up and
Yeah.
become big things over
And you were
time.
mentioning an income tax. It sure feels like one. If we're at
Yeah,
$2 per 1,000 for paid family medical leave in a few years,
yeah.
probably about 3 or 4 they think it would take to actually need that amount. They estimate, I think, going up to 1.6 is the one I've seen for, I think, 2029. But if you add that then to the Walk Cares one, assuming it stays the same, you're around 260, and that is competing with some of the lower income tax states that are out there when you add on our other taxes as well that happen in the state.
And that's and as an added bonus, you can't write it off. Because it's a payroll tax. So you get dinged more than other states when you shouldn't.
Yeah.
Um, hey, I want to thank you for making the time today. I appreciate you being on the go, and we'll see you or other center directors in 2 weeks. We'll have the latest for you, and when it comes to new state policy analysis, Elizabeth visits us on a regular basis. because she's got those two centers that so her plate is very full on the research front. Thank you for taking the time out. I know it's always a stress.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for tuning in. As I said, if there's part of the program you really enjoy, please watch for our YouTube channel and share it and let people know, hey, we've got a program on. You need to be informed about what's happening in Washington State and how it can impact you, your work, the way you educate your children, your checkbook, your housing costs, all of those things. So we try and cover the issues that are important to your life here at Washington Policy Center, and we look for solutions to a better state policy. If you haven't checked out our report card for Washington's future, be sure to do that. It's on the very top of our front homepage. Check out the dial, take a look at the data and what it says about Washington State's direction when it comes to agriculture, when it comes to business policy, state spending. Across the board, there's red flags up. This isn't Washington Policy Center data. This is data largely from the state indicating that there are things going wrong with current policy. And I mean, who would have thought Mississippi would be ahead of Washington State when it comes to educational achievement? So take a look at that. There's some jaw-dropping information there. Share it with friends and others, and remind them doesn't have to be a partisan issue, but it is an issue that says we need new approaches for Washington. Let's find better solutions, and that's what we're hoping to do here at Washington Policy Center. Because accountable government has to take a look at the results. See if the results of your policy are working. If they're not working, you need to reassess and find a new approach. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you in 2 weeks here on another edition of Washington Policy on the Go.
If you found this informative, share it with a friend and consider checking out one of our suggested videos over here. Make sure you're subscribed so that you can stay up to date with the latest policy news from Washington.